Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, let us see some important questions from module 4 which we can expect in examination. The first question, it is a very important question. It is asked many times in the previous exams. Explain the block diagram or elements of modern communication system scheme. This is the block diagram and the explanation regarding each and every block is required. This question is asked many times in the previous exams. You can see the analog communication question paper. This question is asked very often. The next question is, what is modulation? And explain the different methods of modulation techniques. So modulation, as you guys know, which I have explained in my video in detail, so it requires a message signal and a high frequency carrier, and we are going to get the signals, that is modulated signal, if we are going to use AM like this, if we are going to use frequency modulation like this, if we are going to use phase modulation like this. So question may be a general question like explain different methods of modulation techniques, or you may get a question like explain amplitude modulation, explain frequency modulation, explain phase modulation, and you are supposed to write the waveform and writing the message signal as well as the carrier. Here writing the definition is very important. If it is analog amplitude modulation, we need to vary the amplitude of the carrier, and if it is frequency modulation, we need to vary the frequency of the carrier. Similarly in phase modulation, by keeping other two constant. So here you may get confused like whether we need to vary the parameters of the message signal or carrier. Remember, we are not going to change anything in a message signal. We are going to change the frequency or amplitude or phase of the carrier signal. Next one is explain different pulse modulation techniques. In pulse modulation, we have four types: PAM, PWM, PPM and PCM. And here you need to just explain in brief how PAM waveform is going to be generated, PWM waveform is going to be generated, and PPM. Similarly, a pulse code modulation will be having a block diagram. If they ask to write the pulse code modulation, you need to write sampling also. So here is the pulse code modulation technique. It can be asked separately for 5 to 6 marks. You need to explain this block diagram, and also the sampling quantization and encoding also need to be explained by taking the input signal like this. Then the next question is on sampling, Nyquist rate and aliasing. In the previous question PCM, we can explain the sampling in brief. What is sampling? We are going to take with respect to the sampling time is concerned. We are going to sample the analog signal like that. But in this question, explain sampling, Nyquist rate and aliasing, we need to write the statement of sampling. What is the condition for the sampling? And to avoid the aliasing, this is what the condition. We need to keep the sampling frequency greater than the 2 times the maximum frequency of the signal. And what is Nyquist rate? These are the things need to be written for this particular question. Generally, the question will be combined like sampling theorem, Nyquist rate and aliasing. Why? Because these three are related to each other. The next question is on different waves in radio wave propagation. In radio wave propagation, we have seen ground wave, space wave and the sky wave. Here, a little bit of explanation is required. What is a ground wave and how the transmission will be? What is a tropospheric wave? Here you need to explain the troposphere, which is from 0 to 12 kilometers from the ground, and there are two types of waves, and a sky wave. If possible, write the application of these also, where actually the ground wave, space wave and sky wave are going to be used in the communication. And little bit of explanation related to radio waves. Radio waves are electromagnetic waves. They will be having the frequencies from 10 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. Like that, you need to explain briefly. Next we have explain digital modulation schemes. See, out of these two, means digital modulation scheme and the analog modulation scheme, one question we can expect in examination. Modulation is the very important concept in communication. We need to modulate a signal for transmission through a longer distance. So the question may come in examination on analog modulation scheme or digital modulation scheme. Means analog modulation schemes are also amplitude, frequency and phase modulation. Here also in digital we will be having amplitude shift keying, frequency shift keying and phase shift keying. So if you look at the waveforms also, these three are related to the analog modulation schemes. So you can expect the question on modulation schemes out of analog or digital one. And here you need to write these three block diagrams, which is corresponds to amplitude shift keying, frequency shift keying, and phase shift keying. And here you need to carefully write the ASK, FSK, and PSK output. And then explain briefly multiple access techniques. This question also may be come. This is asked many times in the previous exams in different other subjects. So FDMA, TDMA, and CDMA. But here there is no in detail explanation related to FDMA, TDMA, CDMA is considered. Only frequency are going to divide here, time will be divided, different slots are going to be allotted, and different coding methods are going to be used, which is not going to mix up with the different signals. Likewise, we can explain by writing these three diagrams for the multiple access. Then explain about multipath, interference, and fading. This is very important. Here we need to explain the different signals travel through air will be collide each other, constructive interference, destructive interference. And if you show the waveform like this, it is clear to the examiner or the evaluator that you will know the concept clearly. So it will fetch you the maximum marks if you write the diagrams or the waveforms like this. And next question is on error correction. There are two methods in the error correction here in our module 4. So out of those two, one question may be appear in the examination, we can expect. So forward error correction and automatic repeat request is there. So even in the two methods, we will be having a block diagram, transmitter part and the receiver part. We need to explain how transmitter part is going to encode and receiver part is going to decode to correct the error. If you want, you can take an example which I am shown in the video by taking a single bit flip and how it is corrected at the end. Then explain the method of automatic repeat request, as I said, again the block diagram and what is CRC and how the CRC will be calculated, it can be explained. And then explain different types of antennas. This question we can expect this time in the exam. There is no much explanation required for antennas, just we need to write the types and 1 or 2 lines of explanation for a particular antenna and how the physical arrangement will be, antenna physical structure will be, we can explain, so that we can get 6 to 8 marks question from this topic. Some other important questions I have listed here, you can go through this. You can see many questions are repeated here also. Out of these 10, you can go through this for your better understanding. Thank you.